You're listening to the Sanditon Chronicles, where we talk all things Sanditon and Sanditon adjacent. Come along with us as we dissect all of your favorite characters, scenes, and dialogue. We have so much to tell you. Hey guys, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. I'm Maureen.
I'm Janice.
And we are back with our Promise Part 2, talking about ironies and parallels in Sanditon Season 2 and be compared between Season 1 and Season 2 of Sanditon. Mm-hmm. So we're going to kick off things. We got an email from a fan of our show, Stevie Rogers, who wanted to talk about the significance of the May Day celebration. And Janice and I were talking a little bit beforehand. We're guessing that they knew it was May Day because they're from England. Stevie is from England, and they kind of the custom. We didn't know it was May Day because there wasn't a poll, and I don't remember everyone being in white in that first episode of when they were all at the country ball. I thought it was just a ball. They were kind of going in circles in the dance, but that's kind of a dance that they've done in several different
regions. They were largely in white. That it was definitely true.
Yeah. And so I didn't recognize it as being May Day because what I know of May Day involves, like Janice had said, hers, what she knows is outside with the pole. I knew the pole existed, and I don't remember seeing one in that ball, so I didn't connect to that dot that it was May Day. But they wanted to bring up the irony that Allison referred to her white ball dress as being the May Day dress, and Charlotte was wearing the white dress while dancing with potential suitors at what they thought was the village May Day gathering. And there was that irony and parallel of Mary coming to tell Charlotte about the death of her ex-lover when this festival was all about romance and fertility. So the death at the end of a lover was in stark contrast to the May Day celebration of love and fertility. And I would not have picked that up because I didn't realize it was May Day celebration.
But good observation.
Yeah.
We appreciate the input.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Stevie is from England, and she was trying to give us some context to certain celebrations and the way that some customs are done. So that was one thing she wanted to make sure that we knew about. So I thought I'd bring that up right at the top of our irony and parallel discussion, because that's a pretty big, if it was May Day, that's a pretty big contrast to have there.
And even if it wasn't, just the fact that they were having a ball and dancing versus finding out about the tragic news with Sydney.
Yeah, for sure.
So just adds to it.
All right. So what you got, Janice? Where were we going first?
Okay. What I was starting with was that when Captain Carter implied that he had saved many men from drowning, how ironic that he chose to propose in a canoe when
he couldn't swim.
When she gets excited and falls off and almost drowns, and he does nothing to help her. So it certainly gave up the possibility that any of his deceit would be hidden any longer.
Absolutely. And it's almost like just desserts for, you're lying about all this too. And granted, it's not a wicked thing that he was doing. He wasn't being villainous about it, but still you were trying to get a relationship by deceit, and deceit is always found out. So it was kind of him getting his just desserts there.
Yeah, he was certainly not being honest with her.
No.
And and the irony, of course, is that then Fraser, who actually was the person who done all these wonderful deeds, is the one then who saves her.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she has to yell at him first. Why was it you? But
that was the other thing, is that she was upset that it was Fraser who saved her rather than the one who lied to her. And she was upset with Carter too, for sure. I mean, she was very upset with Carter after that. But just she was so confused and she was so flustered that the fact that it was Fraser was very odd to her.
Yeah, and he started that deceit early on, and it certainly things got turned upside down though when she fell in the water. And and Fraser had tried to tell him that he needed to be honest with her, but that didn't change anything. So another thing that I noticed as I was going back through some stuff was how Reverend Hankins warns Georgiana right before she gives him that picture that Lockhart had drawn, that she says, Greeks bearing gifts, be aware of Greeks bearing gifts. And then she opens it and just is, upset about the fact that he'd done this drawing of her. But then it actually turns out that Hankins' words were true, and that she should have been wary of him, as he turns out to be a villain.
Mm-hmm.
So just
I
these
forgot about
little
that line.
tidbits. Yeah, they just throw these little tidbits in that sort of, and he's like, maybe she misinterpreted what I was saying. Well, yes, she did, but ironically, you were right.
And it draws your eye towards people who are really insightful, who are given the impression of being obtuse and just
Yeah.
completely ignorant of things. And that's another irony, is that like people like Mary and like Miss Hankins, they're seen as not really getting it, sort of. You know what I mean? They're
Right.
seen as kind of like, oh, just silly, but they're the ones who, as we discussed in our episode about Parkers, as we discussed in our episode about the Hankins, they're the ones who are really watching people and who are really understanding where people are coming from.
Right.
But people
Yeah.
sort of downplay them because they're like, oh, it's just them. But those are the ones who are the observant ones who actually know what people are really about.
Yeah. Yeah. It it is ironic. Um so it was interesting. A parallel that I found was that in both seasons, Georgiana trusts a man that turns out to be untrustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
Otis, it was unintentional. He didn't mean to be untrustworthy. Lockhart was quite intentional.
Mm-hmm.
He had every intention of being deceitful and untrustworthy.
Yeah.
Thank goodness they found out before she went off with him. That would have been awful.
In both situations,
Oh
both of them
yeah.
ended in a near elopement.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
too, the
And
other thing that's ironic is that both of these men, the reason that she connected so completely with them is because she saw them as not after her money at all, solely based on her. And of course, Otis did love her for her, but her money did cloud his vision, and you get that aspect of it. But both of them were so outside of the norm. They weren't all about what the landed gentry was about. They weren't interested in, or at least not in appearances, they weren't interested in playing the society part. And that's kind of what drew her to them, is that they were so different. And the ones that she spurned and rejected as just money hunters were the ones who she spurned, but the ones who she accepted were actually the money hunters.
Right. And then when you think about the scene where Charlotte and Arthur are talking, and I mean Georgiana and Arthur, and Georgiana speaks about being stared at, never able to feel, these weren't her words, but never able to feel like she belongs, right? She's always stands out. And then ironically, Arthur feels he's completely unseen, even by those closest to him. And that contrast, but it's because, going back to Otis and Lockhart, they both saw her, at least they showed her attention, and made her feel seen. And that was a lot of why she sort of got sucked in by them. Of course, I mean, I really don't think Otis had any evil intentions. I just think that he took advantage of her situation to try and help himself get out of a situation. That's all.
He had an addiction, and her money clouded his judgment.
Yeah.
But it didn't change how we felt about her, I don't think.
No, but do we know for sure? We don't. We never will.
I know there were some people who were writing me in the email saying that they were, or even in comments on YouTube saying that they hoped Otis would come back. I don't think J. Uta James is coming back. I think that he's ducked out of this project and he's done. So I don't think that's a possibility. It would be nice, but I think it has to do with the actor not coming back, as opposed to they didn't want the characters together.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And it'll be interesting to see where the story goes with her, and whether really it has another love story element or not, whether it goes in a completely different direction.
I would kind of like if she ran into Otis while she was searching for her mom.
but who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What's our next one?
so these are like not in any particular order.
Yeah.
But the I was noticing, I was thinking about the fact that it's when Charlotte sues Hannibal the horse. Let's see, like when Charlotte sues Animal the horse, men are always trying to tell her what to do and what not to do, and are usually quite wrong. So, in spite of him saying, stay away from him, be careful, that's what Colburn was saying to her, she went in and sued the horse and was obviously very gifted at it.
Yeah.
And so they just always were underestimating her and trying to keep her from doing what she was very capable of.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that's one mistake Sydney made. And so I thought about the fact that they were both, so in season 1, episode 2, Charlotte leaves Sydney speechless, remember, in the street
Mm-hmm.
when she tries to apologize. And then he is just so mean to her
Yeah.
and says that he doesn't care, it's unimportant to him. And she points out that if he really didn't care, he wouldn't be so rude.
Mm-hmm.
And then in season 2, episode 2, Charlotte is very direct with Colburn, telling him that his girls need to learn more than just how to be marriageable. And she leaves the room thinking that's the end of that. And he's speechless. And then he shows up, you know, rides his horse out to ask her to tell her that he wants to engage her as a governess.
Governance. Yeah.
So she leaves both of them kind of speechless in those
Mm-hmm.
situations.
Yeah.
And more of that comes back later too with Colburn when
Mm-hmm.
he comes to try and apologize. Well, it's sort of like when Sydney at the dinner, at that luncheon, tries to talk to her, I'm interested in your opinion, and she shuts him down.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a tongue lashing from you twice already, and I won't endure a third. And then when at the very end and see in episode 6, when he comes and tries to get her to come back and she is not having it, she is just shuts him down because she's not going to put herself back through that again.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what to say. Well, he says, thank you for making that so clear, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not what he really thinks or feels.
Yeah.
So
And it's interesting too that they both kind of, when they realized they had feelings for her, they both had this idea that they have to protect her, but it's Charlotte who's going to heal them, not the other way around. It's not that. I mean, I think Colburn is going to be part of Charlotte's healing because she lost Sydney and she's grieving and she's broken about that. But I think that you look at what she does for these male characters, it's her who does the fixing, and it's just by being who she is, not like they're projects for her to fix, but just because of who she is and what she has to offer, she ends up being a sort of salvation for them sort of seeing the light for the first time in so long. When they are working to protect her, it's her who saves them, not the other way around.
And a lot of it's because of how she makes them feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that really they open their hearts. That's what we hope that's still going to happen with Coburn, and we expect, but we don't know that for sure, as I keep saying.
I'm all filled with anxiety about that now.
And then we have Lennox, who says to her, when they're walking on the beach, and she tells him that she's had a little bit of success with the girls, at least calling a truce, not maybe winning them over yet. And he says, well, you deserve a position where you receive the respect that you are due.
Mm-hmm.
He says that there, but then at the ball, he treats her with complete disrespect.
Yeah.
And he presumes that she is interested in marrying him. So
and then when she rejects him, it's like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. But in every other conversation they had, it was that, I like this part of you. But then when she disagrees with him, it's, you don't know your own mind sort of thing.
Right. It's completely a contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
So another one that I found was so when Dr. Fuchs sees Esther because she's having this stomach problem, right? And he discredits the herbs that the midwife gave Esther, and yet he gives her the tincture that Edward tries to use to destroy Esther. He's it's not Dr. Fuchs's fault, but he becomes the instrument of Edward's attempt to destroy Esther. And he comes very close. If it wasn't Clara, he would.
Mm-hmm. It'd be interesting to see what his perspective was, knowing that it was laudanum that was destroying her and that it was his tincture that was used for that. It'd be interesting to see what Dr. Fuchs had to say about that, or what his thoughts were on her healing process.
Yeah, but we don't get any of that.
No, it would be nice to know, though.
Would it be nice for him to just acknowledge that she wasn't
Mm-hmm.
suffering from her uterus, what line he has about,
Oh my gosh, can you
this is
imagine
your
what you had to
uterus
endure?
rejecting you. And he just acknowledges that, this happened to her, although, they probably never, I mean, we're not going to know now because that story's done.
Mm-hmm.
But, would be, yeah. Another one I found is, how Arthur said, I'm really jumping around a little bit, but how Arthur said about Lockhart that he sees people with a rare clarity, which it was true, but then he hides who he truly is. So he might see people with clarity, but doesn't allow others to see him with clarity until we find out the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And we, as you and I have discussed, he uses his ability to see people for who they are to manipulate them or attempt to. I mean, he was doing a pretty good job of manipulating Georgiana.
And everybody, I mean, he sort of had everybody fooled.
Yeah. Well, certainly Arthur, huh?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that they were trying to see, he's just eccentric. He's just an artist. And I think he was banking the fact that artists could be loud and artists could be different and eccentric and still be accepted because what they create is beautiful. And I think that he was sort of banking on the beauty that he creates, just like a woman would bank on the beauty that she is to secure a husband. He was doing the same thing, only with what he creates to secure a rich wife.
Yeah, and that's why that line from Lady Denham at the dinner was so fun. At the mess dinner was so funny. Oh, he's just an artist. Just ignore him.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets away with more than most would.
Oh, yeah.
So another one with Charlotte and Colburn was her statement. Just in the statement is the irony. You remember when she says to him, can I share no, let's see, her exact words I don't remember, but it was something along the lines of, can I share an observance I've made, or with you? Can I share an observance with you? And he says, well, you've already made it, so you might as well share it. And what she says is, it strikes me as curious that a man might take such care of his horse while taking pains to avoid his children.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself, what her words were about,
Yeah.
the irony existed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if it wasn't for those words, he would never have sat down with them at the picnic.
Yeah. Yeah. I think everything that Charlotte had said to him, because she gave him the respect of an employer, but everything she said in regards to the girls and his lack of care for them hit him differently.
Right.
Even though he basically said, there's a couple different times where he said, essentially, I'm your boss.
Right.
It was Charlotte who was able to say things to him that would make him change his behavior, not him make her change her behavior.
And the parallel to the first season was the same with Sydney. And Sydney, like when they have the discussion on, oh gosh, it went in and out of my head. When they have the discussion on the street, when he's mad at her for what she does with Otis and Georgiana.
Oh, okay.
And that, right? And then she accuses him very bluntly of being a bigot or
Racist,
very
essentially.
prejudiced, very right, a racist, exactly. And he is just beside himself. And then when they're going to rescue Georgiana and they're in the carriage and they're trying to find her, and she gives him her mind, and then he's like shocked at what she thinks. And yet it completely changes his behavior
Yeah.
later in that episode. And his treatment of Otis changes drastically because of what she says to him. She's not all right by any means. I mean,
No.
he corrects her thinking about him both through his words and his actions.
But I think, and you see that in season 2 with how when she talks to Colburn, how it changes how he treats the girls. In both, it's what Charlotte says about people having basically emotions and feelings that's changed how the men have reacted to their wards in both situations. But you're right, it's not because she's all right, it's because they value her and what she has to say, so it has made them re-examine themselves. It's not because Charlotte said this, so I must do. It's because you can see that they're both a little offended that she said it in the first place.
Right.
But because they value her in both instances, they value who she is, they value what she has to offer, it made them look at themselves differently and their behavior differently and make adjustments because they could see that there was need for improvement.
And of course, with Sydney, we know it's because he had been so hurt and damaged by that relationship. But what she says about how he treated Georgiana and just sort of abdicated his responsibility in a lot of ways. And then we know that in the case of the season 2, Colburn is just so he's self-hate, a lot of self-hate about what he feels like he did to his wife. And so he carries that guilt around and feels like people are better off not being close to him.
Yeah.
And you can see from that picnic how much his daughter and Augusta both really do want to spend time with him and be with him. And if it wasn't for her pointing it out, none of that would have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Even with how Sydney reacted to his brothers, that was because of something Charlotte said on the balcony.
Yep.
And the way he reacted to Tom later on is because of what she said in the street after they healed Old Stringer. So she has a way with words. She's supposed to be a meek woman. She's supposed to be she's a gentlewoman. She's a lady, but she's not. She's still a woman, and she's speaking up boldly to these men who are supposed to be men of themselves and men of the world and their own boss, whatever. And they're heeding her advice because they see the value in what she's saying.
Yeah, and then she's right. The bottom line is, she's really good at observing.
And there's another parallel between that too, in that she is drawn in both cases. She doesn't, it's not like she sees them both. And I mean, I'm sure she was attracted to both of them at some level initially, but we see that they're at odds in the beginning, like all good Jane Austen stories are. The men and women are at odds, but she's drawn to these men who are broken because of their pain. In both situations, even when she herself in the second season, the only difference there, she's drawn to Sydney because but she's drawn to this man who is broken and in pain over something that was done to him. And she is relatively whole and naive. In the second season, she's drawn to Colburn, who is also broken and in pain, but hating himself, something he feels he's done to someone else, while Charlotte is also going through pain and brokenness.
And I think she maybe wouldn't have even been drawn to him if it wasn't for his girls and how much she sees their pain and wants to help heal them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, for one thing, she wouldn't really had any reason to interact with him. And he was such a recluse.
Knowing that Augusta was not actually his, but he took her in, I think made Charlotte probably think, he must be good on some level. He can't be as bad as he's leading everyone to believe if he took in this girl who's not his.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. And so then I think about that it's Charlotte is the one who agrees to go up in the balloon, volunteers to go up in the balloon. She, a woman, when all these other men that Tom is trying to get to go up are refusing to go. And then Lennox is like, well, I'll go with you, and he goes up in the balloon with her and then expresses right away his fear of heights. He, the man, which obviously was the fear that all these people were having.
Mm-hmm.
And then Charlotte's response, which is so Charlotte-like, is fears are there to be conquered.
Yep.
So quite the contrast in those.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only because she goes up in the balloon that the other people are interested in going up in the balloon. And once again, she saves Tom.
Yeah.
And you can tell when she arrives, she's concerned about him, concerned about the fact that nobody wants to get in the balloon.
Mm-hmm.
So not that they would have gotten on the elephant, but
The
had
other
there been an
contrast
elephant
there too is that Colonel Lennox has experienced war. He's been on the battlefield. He's been in battle. He's been the target of shooters, of people shooting at him, and he shot at other people. That's what his life has been. Charlotte's has been relatively sheltered, and she's the one who is willing to go in the balloon. I mean, yes, obviously he was willing after she said so, but as he expresses his fear, Charlotte is the one who grew up relatively sheltered and is willing to take these big risks and these big leaps, whereas the military man who's experienced real terror is hesitant to go on this balloon.
Yeah, because of heights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So we know how ironic it is that Clara has a child and doesn't really want one, and Esther can't have a child and really wants one. So it's in season 2, episode 3, Esther tells Clara that she's incapable of sympathy or love. Clara is, before the baby is born, and then Clara proves ultimately through some help from Esther, she proves that she is capable of both by giving the baby to Esther.
Yep.
That was the ultimate
sacrifice
act of love in that situation. Because no matter what, a single mother was not going to do well in society. And, she had seen enough of Edward's even uglier side.
Yeah.
That she did not want to have that child raised by him.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was such a beautiful parallel to watch play out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it gave us a happy ending, a happier ending for Esther.
Yeah, I think it was a happy ending. I think that her and Babington are going to do great things with that kid.
Yeah. Out of our sight, but
yeah. Can you imagine having Babington as your dad and Esther as your mom? I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, it would. And I think that whole thing really softened Esther too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those I'm sure we can think of more. Those are the ones I got written down.
Mm-hmm.
It was, if you just watch the show for a little while, all these show up to you.
There's so many things that they wrote in that they just subtly weave throughout the stories, and it's great to watch it in this perspective. So as you watch it on your 4th or 5th time, you'll start picking up on all of them.
Right. And so the episode 4, when they have and we've sort of touched on some of these already, but episode 4, when Lady Denham has the garden party and, orders a cake, knowing darn well that there's a sugar boycott going on, orders all these sweets. And so then how can she be surprised when people don't want to eat them?
Yeah.
I'm sure they wanted to, but they weren't going to. Of course, at that point, eating the sugar wasn't going to change. That already had happened. But, it was the principle of the thing.
Yeah.
And just the whole, well, that's when the almost drowning takes place because of the proposal on the canoe. And that's also when we see the conflict between Colburn and Lennox, with especially when they're having the archery contest,
Yeah.
and ironic that she is able to shoot an arrow so well for Lennox and sort of not at all or poorly for Colburn. So it's the opposite of what we think her heart is saying.
Yeah. Well, I think I think it could be said too that maybe Colburn's presence unsettles her more than Lennox's presence does. Not in a bad way.
I
but
mean,
clearly his proximity affects her.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's the line they're trying to draw there. And I think too, in that scene when Lennox says all's fair in love and war, yet he is constantly manipulating these situations with his words and actions. So he's actually not playing fair, but all's fair in love and war.
No, that's right. Yeah.
And Lady Denham too, and you see it in season 1, you see it in season 2 with these big events that she hosts. Lady Denham puts herself above everybody else. Lady Denham is the lady of the town. She is the great woman of Sanditon, and she expects people to come to her. But then you see, like with her conversation with Esther in season 1, and even some vulnerability she lets out in season 2, that, you know, she has been rejected before. So you can kind of see, especially it's highlighted a little bit more than it was at the pineapple luncheon. It's highlighted more at the garden party when she wants everyone to grovel over her and what she's done and what this bounty she offers them. But when they turn away, you see her insecurity then when it comes out.
Right.
So in both instances, it's this woman who presents herself as a very self-assured, always right woman to be held above everyone else, who's in actuality insecure and needs fawning over and needs people to tell her how good she is, because I don't think she feels that way about herself.
And it's amazing how often that is the case, with people. Yeah. And then of course she's told Edward to stay away, and then he shows up to say that he and Clara are engaged, and so her party's still not going the way she wants it to.
Yeah. And even in that, like, she tells him to stay away as, punishment, you'll stay away from me forever. But in the end, she has made it so he has to stay with her. So in the, like, originally it was to separate him from the herd, so to speak. But in the end, it was ensuring that she's the one who gets to exact justice on him. So he has to stay.
But at this point, by that time, he sent away the people that he could hurt.
Yeah.
Because remember early on, she says, well, he can't hurt us. He can't have any effect on us. That's before she knows about the baby and, Clara and all that. But yeah. And so it is, and the whole story that's woven through that, Sydney is gone, and this great inquiry about why Sydney was in Antigua, which is where he contracted yellow fever. And then they find out that he was there to stand up for Georgiana in the courts. And here's right there in town with them, they don't know yet, is the person behind all of that. Ironic that Sydney won in court but lost his life. Lockhart lost in court but has his life.
Yeah.
And continues to attempt to do bad things.
He learned nothing. And I think in that you can see that Sydney learned the value of who Georgiana was and what it was to actually have a well-lived life. And you could see that by him fighting for Georgiana in the midst of this, but losing his life. Whereas Lockhart, he learned no lesson at all.
And Georgiana, who really had carried a poor opinion of Sydney, finds out just how honorable he is.
Yeah.
By the sacrifice he made, not only for Tom and the town, but also for her personally.
Yeah, we see in season 1, she does nothing but decry his efforts as trying to keep her prisoner, trying to keep her captive, not caring about her, not loving for her. When in season 2, we can see that even from the grave, he's protecting her. He has set apart ways to save her and set her free. So what she thought was true was very clearly proven wrong in totality in season 2.
Right. Yeah, That's right. So yeah, the whole thing's just full of ironies. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, here not Esther, sorry. Clara went to Lady Denham to save her, but she ends up, giving away her opportunity for a fortune, basically, as
Mm-hmm.
and Edwards at the same time, for love of that child and her appreciation of Esther. And then you see, um oh gee, all the so the Colburns, what they needed most of all was Charlotte in their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
he is reminded by Lennox of, um, how he abandoned, according to Lennox, abandoned his wife and Lucy, and now he's warning him about what he might do to Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ends up running away from the thing, sending away the very thing that he needed the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. And
So
the interesting thing there too is that every time that Lennox tried to pull Charlotte away from Lennox by using his own words, his own manipulation, his own objective, it didn't work. But what actually broke them apart was Lennox not even talking to her about it. It was him talking
right,
to Colburn that separated them.
yeah, yeah. And here is we see, Leo is not really his daughter,
Mm-hmm.
but she wants to be more than anything treated as his daughter.
Yeah.
And at least he does show up. I mean, obviously the words he says, he being Colburn, says to Leonora are really loving, and
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But
Because I think Colburn did love his wife and she's a piece of his wife. And he, even if he knows that she is not his own, it's still part his. I mean, not only did he raise her, but it's a piece of his wife who I think he did love on some level. I think the love was lost along the way, but I think he did on some level.
yeah, yeah.
It's interesting too
So
that with Carter, like the reason Allison fell in love with him was that perceived salvation with the carriage ride. Like, oh, my savior, he saved me. But what made her fall out of love with him was when he couldn't save her or wouldn't save her.
in reality, yeah,
Yeah, and it was all perceived. The first salvation from him was perceived. He didn't actually do anything but turn her over. It was all he
yeah,
did. So that's what made her fall in love. But then realizing that he actually wouldn't help her or save her in the event that she needed saving was what cemented them, and just him being him.
yeah, yeah.
And that's
And then
she claimed he's great. I know who he is. I love him and we're meant to be, but it was him being who he is what separated them.
yeah, yeah, the fact that he wasn't who she thought he was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and yeah, there's so many great things that happened in both of these seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So it will just be really interesting to see how they tie this all up next season.
Yeah.
I think it and I'm sure you saw that email where it looks like the third season is coming out on March 19th.
Yeah.
At least that
So
was leaked.
yes, by the Fort Wayne PBS. So
Yes.
people who were asking on our YouTube page if we had any information on season 3, we don't directly. We know that what PBS Fort Wayne put out saying that it was March 19th, it was coming, but they also put out a statement after that saying that they jumped the gun. They did not intend to release that. And there has been no confirmation from Masterpiece as of yet.
Right.
To what the date is. So it's looking like that will be, we just can't say for certain it is because it hasn't been confirmed by PBS Masterpiece.
So I think we were already thinking it'd be March before it came out,
yeah.
but
I was hoping March 12th, but I'm okay with March 19th.
Yeah.
So if we have forgotten anything, any parallels or ironies, like Stevie Rogers did, send us an email or comment on our YouTube video or reach out to us on our Facebook group, which is the Sanditon Chronicles Sanditon Family Fan Club, and let us know if there's a parallel that you noticed that we didn't talk about. And there's way more than what we talked about, by the way. There's so much more. I think we just went into the big things. Like there's towards the end there, we talked about these little teeny tiny pieces that were just things that were brought out of statements. It's filled with that in season 1 and season 2. Compare the two of them. Let us know what you think. If you found any ironies that were particularly interesting to you, or parallels between characters or seasons or actions, whatever it is, let us know. We want to hear about that. And check us out on our Facebook and all of our socials. We try to be responsive. We try to get back to you, and we try to interact with you. We'd like to hear from you, good or bad. We want to know what you like about our channel and what you think. And please, please, please do not forget to subscribe. If you are watching this video, subscribe to it on YouTube, and you'll find in the description of all of our podcasts, whether it's on YouTube or a podcast platform, in the description, there's always all of the links to our social medias and our emails and all of that information. But please subscribe to our channel so we can continue to bring you great content, and so we can hopefully bring you some more stuff in the future that is more your liking. So next week, I think we're going to dive into going between Sanditon and some of the Pride and Prejudice. That's automatically where my head goes. Between Sanditon and Jane Austen books and stories. Clearly, a lot of mine are going to be about Pride and Prejudice, so I can't stop that if I tried. So remember to also send us your fan fiction, because after we do our next episode, we're going to try to do some fan fiction reviews. It doesn't have to be something other than Sidlot. It can still be a Sidlot happy ending if that's what your fan fiction is about. We just want to read your fan fiction. We'll review it. We'll talk about it. We'll, we'll be very, not critical, but we'll be constructive and nice. So there's that. But until then, we'll see you. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Are you craving more TSC content? Head on over to our social media accounts. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles Sanditon Family Fan Club. Also, check out our website, thesanditonchronicles.com. Of course, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to hear and what your thoughts are. Email us at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in every week for new episodes.